You're listening to the Assembly Call IU podcast and postgame show, the place where Indiana fans across the globe hang out online after every IU basketball game. Join us for our live broadcasts on Thursday nights and immediately following every IU game at our website, assemblycall.com. That's assemblycall.com. Welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call, as tonight your Indiana Hoosiers finally outlast the Wisconsin Badgers in double overtime, 75-73, to snap a 5-game losing streak. And as we were just talking about before we went live, what an absurd season that, you know, the second half of the year, Indiana can't beat anybody except at Michigan State and against Wisconsin. This is like the most bizarro Indiana basketball season of all time. But on this night, the Hoosiers get a win, finally showing, you know, just a lot of mental toughness down the stretch with guys fouling out and, bounces not going Indiana's way, not able to, to make plays, and Wisconsin's able to get back into it. They make free throws, but ultimately, the final play that needed to be made was made. Indiana did it, and they won. And we're here to talk about it on this edition of the Assembly Call IU postgame show. And we will start it the way we start every show, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And it came, of course, with 9.6 seconds to go, 73-73 in double overtime. Romeo Langford gets the ball, goes the length of the court, drives right, and scores. This is what everyone has wanted to see from Romeo all season long in these late-game situations. And granted, the Wisconsin defense was not great. I mean, Khalil Iverson just let him go right. And I have a feeling if there was an opening like that, late in the Michigan State game and late in the Iowa game, he probably would have done the same thing. But he did it here. He scored, puts Indiana up 75-73, and it really capped what was just a tremendous 2 overtimes from Romeo. He scored 13 points in the overtime periods, finished with 22, and on a night when so many guys fouled out, Juwan Morgan fouls out, Justin Smith fouls out, Al Durham fouls out, Romeo Langford played 45 minutes, 7 rebounds to go along with the 22 points, and just made a lot of big buckets. And we'll talk, there were some possessions where he stood in the corner too long and didn't get involved, and, there was a lot of questionable late-game execution. But on this night, the biggest play that needed to be made, Romeo made it, put the Hoosiers on his back on that play, and delivered the 75-73 victory for the Hoosiers, snapping the losing streak. And finally, we have another victorious episode here of the Assembly Call and a win that we can talk about, which we will continue doing here as we move forward on the show. All right, tonight's Hoosier Proud banner moment brought to you, as always, by our friends at Hoosier Proud and Home Field. At homefieldapparel.com, you will find the comfiest and most unique licensed IU apparel available anywhere. And at HoosierProud.com, you'll find great state of Indiana-themed apparel while sending 10% of your purchase to causes around Indiana, like the Hoosier Veterans Assistance Foundation. Both brands were started by an IU grad, and all Hoosier Proud and Home Field apparel is designed and printed out of Indianapolis. And with the Big Ten and NCAA tournament looming, be sure to check out Home Field's Indiana All the Way t-shirt featuring an IU basketball design made popular during the school's championship run, something that you can reflect on nostalgically, as Indiana probably won't be in the NCAA tournament, but hey, you win this game, maybe it can start a big run for the Hoosiers. It's late, and it was a double overtime game, so we'll dare to dream here, at least for a moment. And then, of course, you can check out the vintage Bison hoodie on the tri-blend material, which we all love, especially with the low temps in Bloomington, which we're going to get to experience this weekend, as we will be in Bloomington. Just a reminder that if you're going to be at the Michigan State game, to let us know, because we'd love to say hi. But I have a feeling we'll all be packing our Bison hoodies for that trip.
Can a brother get some coupons?
Yes, don't forget to use the promo code ASSEMBLY at checkout for 15% off your order on either site. That is promo code ASSEMBLY at HoosierProud.com and HomeFieldApparel.com. All right, well, it's time to move the ball, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team. And let's start with Andy Bottoms. Andy, your Bottoms line on this thrilling, exhausting Indiana victory.
Well, for those in the Eastern time zone with me, welcome to Wednesday. I mean, what a crazy game. We saw a game in which Ethan Happ fouled out. We saw IU beat Wisconsin in a season that they've lost, as you said, to everybody but them and at Michigan State since the turn of the new year. And so it's just the way you draw it up. Never a doubt, right? But ultimately, it just feels great for these kids to be able to get a win. You kind of wonder, you let your mind go in places when they blow that 13-point lead and you get that here we go again feeling, and you start to wonder how many times these guys can pick themselves up over the last couple of weeks, to come back from that Minnesota game, give great effort against Purdue, lose a 2-point game, to go play so well at Iowa, lose that one as well. On some crazy shots. And you kind of felt like they were starting to turn the corner. They let Wisconsin back in it, which feels like a lifetime ago. And then to see them be able to bounce back and somehow without Juwan, Justin Smith fouls out. You're playing the front line of a guy that was throwing up before the game and a guy who'd played 20 some minutes over the course of the entire season in the front court for basically the entirety of overtime against Hap and Wisconsin. And just has to feel great for those guys to be able to get a win like this and be rewarded for something that they earned based on how hard they've played these last few weeks. And who knows, if this season has taught us anything, it's that any singular game means absolutely nothing in terms of what will happen in the next game. But just happy for these kids to be able to get rewarded and earn a win against a team that IU's had a ton of trouble with, but quite frankly, against anybody at this point feels pretty good. So a lot to talk about to the extent that we can actually remember how we got here, but exciting for them, and just a great win for them. Finally getting a win at home, and we're sitting down right now at the press conference of three freshmen in Romeo, Race, and Rob Finnessy. Those guys were all pretty big tonight, so lots to talk about.
Absolutely. All right, Ryan, this is your last chance to rant about Ethan Happ, but my sense is you're going to have something else that you want to talk about on this.
No,
on this
Happ was
evening.
Ethan Happ. He was flailing around, getting calls and whatever-ness, but you know what? Indiana never has to see him again unless they face him. I just jinxed
You jinxed it. Dang it. Actually, no. You know what? If we get so lucky as to make it that far in the Big Ten tournament, fine, we'll take that.
Here's the only thing I want to say about tonight is Romeo Langford 45 minutes, Al Durham 46 minutes, Rob Finnessy 43 minutes, Race Thompson, who had played 22 minutes all season, played 21 minutes. Those guys all stepped up and they all played out of their minds and played great basketball, especially on the defensive end in 50 minutes to hold Wisconsin to 73 points, to hold Hap to, he had 23, but he 9 of 18 from the field, 5 of 10 from the free throw line. I mean, they made him work for everything. Iverson really got going in the first half, but really didn't seem to have much of an impact in the second half. They really made Wisconsin work for everything. They defended the 3-point line. Wisconsin's the best 3-point shooting team in the Big Ten, shot 6 of 22, and that's because they were all contested. Yeah, I know. At the end, Trice dribbles to the center of the floor and turns and shoots, and there's really nothing you can do about that. If you're any closer to him, you'll foul him, which they did later. But it's just that they played their guts out and they deserve to win. They deserve to win in regulation. They deserve to win the first overtime. And then they finally put it together and pulled it off because of Romeo in the last overtime. But those guys were exhausted. You could see it on the floor. Deron Davis, I mean, he played 22 minutes, but he wasn't in shape to go a full game. He was
puking 2 hours ago, 3 hours
he
ago.
Sick. I mean, he really did. And you could see when he get the ball a couple times, he missed layups because he couldn't get off the floor. I mean, he was exhausted. He was worn down clearly. But those guys all gutted it out, and kudos to them. They deserve to win this game. They earned it. And there have been some losses they've had, I think, where they deserve to win it. They battled through some really poor officiating. I thought there were calls that didn't go against Indiana that on Wisconsin's side there were some missed calls, but I thought they got the lion's share of the calls all night long. Indiana fought through it. Fought through their starting front court being out with fouling out. Fought through Al Durham, their best defender, on the perimeter, fouling out, and still just continue to battle and continue to battle and continue to battle. And 24 personal fouls against 17 for Wisconsin, and still they wound up coming out on top. That is not a recipe for beating Wisconsin, and they did a great job to stick with it and fight through it.
Yeah, no, the recipe for Wisconsin, as we talked about in the preview, in the games that they've lost or that have been close, you got to battle them to at least a draw from the 3-point line, and then you got to beat them at the free throw line. And Indiana did that. Indiana made 6 threes in the first half, and I'm really impressed that Indiana did not fall in love with the 3 in the second half after going 6 of 14 in the first half. They didn't get a lot of good looks in the second half, and they didn't force it. They took 6 in the second half in overtime. They missed them all. but they did such a good job of attacking the basket. And Indiana, ends up taking 27 free throws to Wisconsin's 27, and the Hoosiers make 17 and Wisconsin makes 13. I know, we'll get to stats a little bit later, but, Indiana goes 12 of 23 on layups. Wisconsin goes 11 of 23 on layups. So a lot has gone against Indiana during this losing streak. And I do think that there were some moments tonight when, Wisconsin would have a good look late and they would miss a couple of those layups, or Trice miss a couple of free throws. The one Brad Davis in 3 actually rattled out instead of rattling in. So some of those things,
for sure that was going down.
I did too. Everybody did, and so it's nice, where those things are kind of even, because Indiana had their own there, and then Indiana is the team that's able to make the play late. But, we'll get into talking more about, Romeo Langford. We'll talk about Juwan Morgan, who, had a really interesting night before he fouled out. But let's spend a few minutes on Race Thompson, because I thought the game really turned in the first half when Race got in there. There was a little stretch where it was 12-12, and Fitzner and Deron Davis come in. Wisconsin immediately has a 5-point possession. They get taken out, and Race Thompson, I thought, really did a good job defensively of containing Ethan Happ and kind of slowing down what Wisconsin had going down in the post. And, didn't play a ton early in the second half, but then played huge in the overtimes because Juwan Morgan was out, and really had one of the more impactful one-point games that you'll ever see from a freshman. Just made smart plays, like the little tap pass that he had whenever that was, when Rob Finney got it to Deron Davis. I guess that was what made it 73-70, and then Deron missed the free throw. But he really showed tonight, Andy. We know Ryan will come in and remind us of his thoughts on Race Thompson, but he really showed us tonight what we've been missing, which is a guy who can come in off the bench and either replace Juwan or play with Juwan to be able to defend guys down low. And it's not just his ability to bang. He's pretty quick, and he plays so hard defensively. And that's what really stood out. And so I think even though it doesn't necessarily pop on the stat sheet, I thought he was so important to Indiana being able to get this win tonight.
Well, I'm old enough to remember when Ryan discovered Race Thompson, so that's obviously important to remember. But I agree. I did really think, that was one of the first notes that I really took in the first half, was that he had come in and played so well, because to that point, IU had gotten nothing off the bench. They got off to a decent start. Devontae came in, didn't play very well. Fitzner had that rough couple minutes and never came back in. Deron looked like a guy who had just thrown up not very long before that and really struggled. And so he really had to step in, but I thought he did a good job of, giving Happ enough space. And then when he really got into him, he just walled up and really kept himself from committing fouls against Happ and Reavers and really anybody inside. I thought he just did a good job of using his body as best he could, making it hard to, shoot over him, but he wasn't swatting down at anybody. He wasn't really gambling. And he had some really, really nice closeouts. There was one in particular, they kicked it out to Reavers at the top of the key, and it was just like a textbook closeout, chappy feet, high hands, just did everything that you'd want him to do. And I think, we will never know what he looked like playing defense when he came in, but this is where you can start to see a guy who's been in the system, albeit in practice last year, able to really step in and do the things that the coaching staff needed. So he had some big rebounds. I thought did a good job for the most part, positioning wise. And really, I thought he gave a good mix of what you need to defend a guy like Happ, where he was strong enough, but also, was able to move his feet enough. And that's something, if you think back even to the Hoosier Hysteria scrimmage, that was one of the things that stood out, was he guarded, I think it was Jerome Hunter or maybe Justin Smith. I forget who it was, but really showed good quickness and kind of cutting off a drive in that game. And I think you saw that tonight, and against a guy like Happ with the variety of moves that he has, but he kept up with him. Once he, had gotten back down to a certain point, just stood there with his arms up and tried to do his best to contest shots. So a really impressive performance from him. Certainly a guy who's feels like he's earned some additional minutes after basically doubling his minute output for the season in this game.
Right.
Yeah, I think you're seeing what Indiana's been missing in Race Thompson. I mean, the kid could have made a huge impact this year, and it's unfortunate that he didn't get to this point. Now he's starting to. And you're really seeing it, and this is the kind of stuff we saw on high school film when you watched it. You definitely saw a more well-rounded offensive player, but again, when you miss like 2 months because of a concussion, you're not shooting a basketball, you're not dribbling a basketball, you're basically starting from the ground up again offensively, and that's going to take time, and that's probably not going to be right until next season, until he has a full summer to work out. That's just the way basketball is. It's a rhythm sport, and you've got to be into it. But I really think, when you look at Race Thompson, there's several things that he does that are incredibly important. One, he's got a great basketball IQ.
Yes,
He's
he does.
Smart. He has great instincts. He knows not to overplay a guy shooting a three. He knows to force a guy, get the hand in his face, but don't overplay it so we can drive right by you. And that happened to him late in I think one of the overtimes. He ran up and he just immediately grabbed the guy, make him go beat you at the free throw line. Don't let him drive right by you. That was the only time he screwed up defensively all game, really. And again, freshman. These are his first 40 college minutes.
Our three smartest players are freshmen, by the way.
Yeah, I completely agree. And he's just. I'd throw Al Durham into that mix. I think Al Durham's he's a sophomore. I would put him as one of our smartest players. But no, just the basketball instincts that Race Thompson has are fantastic. And when you look at how he fits into next year, I think he just steps right into Juwan Morgan's role. Now, of course, you got to fit Trayce Jackson-Davis in there, and there's some other things that have to go. But he's the guy who can do the inside-outside stuff that Juwan Morgan does, and he can be the aggressive rebounder. He can be the guy that just takes a pounding defensively and looks fine. I mean, he, at one point on the broadcast, they said he didn't back down when they tried to back him down. He took the impact and stayed right there and kept his feet planted. And he made life difficult for Ethan Happ. He outplayed Ethan Happ, offense versus defense there. He outplayed him. Now, again, you got to get him working on the offensive end. But even on the offensive end, you see the basketball instincts when he caught that pass when they were running up the floor and he just gave it up immediately. He knew, look, I haven't shot free throws in a long time. 1 of 2 tonight. I don't want to go to that line again. Give it up to the guy who can shoot free throws in Rob Finney. Just a smart player, an instinctive player, and a guy that we desperately have missed this year. And every time he steps on the floor, IU fans should be excited about the future. Here's something fun to imagine. Next year, with that defense from Race Thompson, defending Trayce Jackson-Davis every day in practice. How good are those guys going to get? Mm-hmm. Just going up against each other every day in practice. I'd buy a ticket to that.
And Deron Davis, too. Well,
Deron Davis, too.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously. But you look at the two younger guys going at each other, sort of to make each other better. And I just think it's going to be great for both of them starting this summer to get to do that. And you look at Race Thompson. When Race Thompson came in, we said, when he was going to redshirt, we said, this is a guy we talked about. He could be a star in the Big Ten. He legitimately could be. And we haven't gotten to see him. Now we're getting to see him. And you're starting to see what we saw when we watched his high school film.
Absolutely. Big Ten opponents are not going to want to deal with Race and Trayce for the next 2-3 years. That is for sure. All right, coming up, we're going to continue our breakdown of Indiana's 2-point victory over Wisconsin in double overtime. I'll point out tonight's meaningful moment that you might have missed. There's a lot of them. And then we'll go inside the numbers to highlight the most important statistical notes from the game. You are listening to the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show, a late Assembly Call IU postgame show, but man, an exhausted one, but a celebratory one as the Hoosiers beat Wisconsin to end the 5-game losing streak. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, and we're breaking down every angle of this victory over Wisconsin. And guys, it's time for tonight's meaningful moment that you might have missed. And look, there's a lot of them. I mean, in a double overtime game, there are so many moments that decide the game. Like, remember the big shot Rob Finney hit was at the end of regulation? Yeah, I mean, there's so many moments. But to me, the one that really was the biggest in even allowing this game to come down the stretch, and I'm going to be really interested to get your guys' thoughts on this. Indiana came out at the start of the second half. After really playing well in the first half, having a 4-point lead at halftime, the Hoosiers were dynamite to start the second half. I mean, the defense was on point. Our energy was great. We weren't settling for threes. We were going inside. Everything was working. And we're up, I believe it was 47-34. We were definitely up by 12, 13 points, something like that. And we came down, I believe it was right before the under 12-minute timeout. And Juwan had 3 fouls, so I understand why he went to the bench. I think there was even a point where Rob Finney, it looked like he was kind of holding his calf, and I think they were working on his calf, but Archie also took Romeo out of the game, presumably to get him some rest before the under 12-minute timeout. But with those 3 guys off the court who had been so important in the game so far, I mean, Indiana's 3 best players overall, Wisconsin immediately went on a spurt. They scored 8 points on 3 possessions. It was an 8-2 run because Al had hit a mid-range shot. But it really seemed like Indiana got out of their rhythm and could never get it back. And I think Wisconsin ends up going on a 20-3 run. And Andy, as I look at that, to me, when you're desperate to win a game And again, I get why Juwan was out, and if they needed to, look at Rob medically, fine. I don't understand how you take Romeo out there too. Even if you want to get him some rest, save it till the under 8-minute timeout. I just really thought, given the timing, given the context, that was a really poor decision by Archie, and it seemed to get the team totally out of rhythm that they almost never really got back. It's like they were just hanging on for the rest of regulation. And you could say, look, you can't blame one decision on what happened 5 minutes later, but it really, to me, seemed to kind of have a cascading impact. And when you have a chance to put your foot on their throat, which is what it felt like Indiana had, I just was not a fan of the lineups that were played in the middle part of the second half at all.
Yeah, that was, had IU lost this game, I think we'd come in here and really look back on that stretch as the turning point. So it's fair to bring it up now. And yeah, it just felt like it felt like you really just pushed the envelope too much, saying and relaxed a little bit as a coach. And I think that made the players relax on the floor of, hey, we got this. We're going to coast for a few minutes while we, ride this out and get these guys some rest. And I think Juwan for sure makes sense. You got to take him out. He had the fouls, didn't have 4 at that point, but I can get giving him a rest, but you have to try to stagger that at some point, especially with Rob out there, who's another guy that can create a little bit. But at that point, at least, leave Romeo on the floor and do something, because the other thing that happened in that stretch was the defense wasn't quite as good. Wisconsin hit a few threes, and they're 1 of 12 from 3, and all of a sudden they hit 4 of their next 5 over that 20-3 run. And so it really gets difficult at that point to try to turn things around. And that was where, as I said, it was really felt like the danger zone for IU, whether they could turn things around and pick themselves back up. And to their credit, they did. And that started with Finney getting to the line and making a couple free throws. And that started a stretch where IU scored on, 5 out of 6 possessions there after the end of that run to really get back in the game. So that was the other thing is, Rob being a guy and using the free throw line, even though they didn't shoot him well, to pull themselves out of it a bit and get back in the game. But yeah, I thought that stretch was just kind of getting too cute, I guess, if you want to think of it that way, where I just don't know that you can afford to do that. And as you said, you want to be, kind of putting, you got to balance trying to run them off the court with, trying not to burn everybody out. But that seemed a place where the pendulum swung too far in one direction for sure.
Yeah, and credit to the coaching staff, I think, for getting Juwan back out there with 4 fouls with about 6.5 minutes to go. Juwan ends up, picking up a 5th foul that was just not a good play by him, bid on a pump fake we've seen. I thought Bruiser Flint's decision to demand that review was terrific. So, the coaches...
Come on, you Bruiser.
Yeah, the coaches did some good things, but...
Which was obvious. There's no way that should be reviewed. But
I know.
They review the most innocuous things that require no review whatsoever. They reviewed these other ones to put 0.1 seconds back on the clock. Yet that play in a critical juncture of the game, that what wasn't clear cut of what actually happened, there was going to be no review until they complained. So good on them for complaining, but my goodness.
It took him the entire time out to get him to convince him to do it too. Like, it's just,
yeah.
Can we please just blow up the officiating in this conference and start over from scratch? Because it's just every game. It is so bad.
It's bad. And, bad and, both sides a lot of times, but not consistent.
Maybe we could get Fran McCaffrey to come in and give his thoughts on Big Ten officiating. Anybody?
The story of Fran's meltdown from today is the greatest thing I saw.
I wrote it on the Big Lead. If you guys want to go catch up on what we're talking about, go click over the Big Lead.
On some level, he said what we've all thought from time to time. So in that regard,
yeah, I'm kind of with Fran.
But as a coach, I'm not sure how that's going to go over. Anyway, go ahead.
So the other thing,
the most level-headed guy in the room right now.
The other thing I want to talk about is, look, that last possession by Romeo was great, and I thought he had some possessions where he was really aggressive. I was really pleased to see him use his mid-range game more. Ben Ladner and I actually talked about that on Basketball 201 earlier today, and he did that more. But there are still these possessions, Ryan, where, and there were 2 in a row when it was 60-60 in regulation, where he literally stands in the corner the entire possession, and maybe he'll take a step or 2 up to the wing, but he will just stand there. I can't imagine that's how they draw it up. Maybe it is, but he's just standing there. He's not cutting. He's not active. And there are other possessions where, sometimes, he'll get the ball on a handoff or he'll get it off of a ball screen. And I think you made mention of this on Twitter. He'll be too quick to give it up sometimes. So, I thought we saw more times from him tonight where he was determined, I'm going to drive to the basket, I'm going to get there, and it was big. But again, you look back at how regulation ended, it did not need to go to overtime. We threw away some of these possessions late where we don't get him the ball in a position to score. And I still have a hard time on some of those possessions. Look, I think ultimately it goes to the coaching, because if you're not getting your best player in a position or demanding that he do it, then it's your responsibility. But I do think there are some moments where Romeo can be more assertive too. And we saw it some in overtime, which to me was part of why this win is so rewarding.
Yeah, and look, I think if you're Romeo, you've got to watch tape of that final possession and just understand that you can do that every single time. There's nobody in this conference who's going to guard you consistently straight up one-on-one. It's just not going to happen. Now, if you're going against a zone like Iowa and, you're driving into crowds all the time and stuff like that, yeah, I get it. You got to give the ball up. But there were times in late in regulation and overtime where he would get the ball off a dribble handoff and just immediately hand it off to somebody. That's not drawn up in the playbook. He has the option to do that, but he also has the option to turn the corner or take the screen and drive or do his step back or something like that. I get it late in the game. You don't want to do the step back because you don't have the legs you did in the first half, but that's not how the play is drawn up. You have the option, and he was taking the easy option of handing the ball off. And that's, when you're as talented as he is, you want to be a lottery pick. You're in the mix to be a top 10, top 7 pick. You can't do that. I mean, you're the best player on the floor. Go prove it. And he did on that last drive, and it was great to see him sort of come through and provide the victory. And you saw him do it some other times. There's a play on I forget, was it Reavers, where he was inside and he ball faked him. He jumped up, kind of got bodied by Reavers and banked it in.
Yeah,
that was a great play. And you want to see a great player make great individual plays, but one-on-one, there is nobody who can guard him. There's a few people in the nation who can guard him. And certainly not, on Wisconsin, who can guard him straight up. I want to see him attacking all the time. And I've said that all year, that I want to see him attacking earlier in games. He attacked a little bit earlier tonight. But then there were stretches where he just kind of flowed with the game. And I think it's part of it is his personality. He wants to fit in. He's not a guy who demands the ball. He's not a ball hog. He's a guy who plays within a system. He, doesn't want to be like the only guy doing anything. He's always been that way. That's the way he was in high school. He scored a lot, but he played through the team system. And when he get the ball, he'd attack from that. He wants to be a guy who fits in. He wants to be part of the team. That's great. And that's a great attitude to have. But quite frankly, in moments where you need to take over, and I've said this about he and Juwan Morgan, they need to demand the ball and go and dominate. And I think that, you're starting to see that Deron Davis needs to demand the ball a little bit more too. I think he does. I think they just have to get him the ball. I think that's part of it. But those three guys need to, in crunch time, need the ball in their hands, and they need to get a touch. And they need to not only give it a touch, they need to be able to do something with it. And late in I think it was in regulation, Deron Davis got a touch and gave it up for a nice pass and created an open shot. And he's a guy who, can do that from time to time for you. So I just think that all three of those guys really need to be able to attack and be able to do things for you, because they're the three guys you can rely on the most. And Romeo certainly showed that late, but he needs to show that more often.
Yeah, the one thing with Romeo that I would say is some of those plays that you talked about where he gave the ball up really early, what that doesn't do, it doesn't actually, all that movement is designed to force the defense to react to something. And in an ideal world, create space even where he's drawing other guys to him and he can kick it back out to a shooter. But if you're giving it up a step inside the 3-point line, that's not actually happening. And there were definitely times, anytime he turned a corner and had a switch with Brad Davison on him, like he has to drive him. And that play that Ryan mentioned was a good one where even if you can't get all the way to the basket, you're doing something to make the defense react. And that nice kind of step under and making the bank shot was good there. And he even said as much after the game, it sounds like, in some of his comments about learning from those other late game situations and trying to be more aggressive. He didn't really take jump shots at end game scenarios tonight. And even the one at the end of, I guess it was the first overtime, where it looked like he got bumped on the perimeter before, review number 26 of the night. You could tell he was trying to put his head down and drive. Just couldn't quite turn the corner. Iverson was at times a decent matchup on him, but he also had his way with him at others in the first half. So I think you just see a guy learning a bit of how to use the talents that he has and to go from there. But certainly had the right approach on the game winner.
Andy, let's hit numbers here quickly. Look, you hold Wisconsin to 0.97 points per possession. That's really good. I mean, just another game where Indiana's defense, really drove the victory. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so proud of this team and just so relieved that they got this win, because they've played so hard defensively for 130 minutes now over the last 3 games, and they got rewarded for it with the victory. But, I mentioned this already, but I think it's so important. I'm going to mention it again. You look at what Indiana did. Look, we knew the 3-point line and the free throw line were going to be huge in this game because, it's where so many Wisconsin games are dictated, and frankly, so many Indiana games. And Indiana goes 6 of 14 from 3-point range in the first half, one of their best shooting halves of the year. Only 1 of 2 from the free throw line. Okay, you'll take it because, you hit 6 threes. We'll take that without any arguments. Like, no matter what else comes with it. But I talked about on the halftime report how I was nervous that, a bad shooting team hits 6 threes in the first half. Are they going to fall in love with the three-pointer? Because it's happened to Indiana. And when Justin Smith jacked a 3 early in the second half, I'm thinking, oh no, this is not going to go good. But you look at what Indiana did in the second half. 0 of 3 from three-point range, 13 of 18 from the free throw line. So, and I don't think they were just like passing up a bunch of open threes. They just weren't getting them, but they did what they wanted to do, which is attack the basket, and that's why they got fouled. So I was just, I know a lot of the execution wasn't good, but I thought they came out with the right mindset in the second half to do the things that they wanted to do offensively. And this is one of the first games we've seen where Indiana hasn't been content to just do what the defense wants them to do. They've actually attacked and asserted their will on the game a little bit more tonight. I think that's a big reason why they were able to win. What number stood out to you, Andy?
Well, just to underscore your point, when they got off to that good start in the first part of the second half, I mean, they scored on 6 of their first 8 possessions, all of them either getting to the free throw line or dunks, drives to the basket. Smith had a tip in. I mean, everything was around the basket or getting fouled, getting to the free throw line, and even after that, the next couple of points were at the foul line as well. So I thought those things were important. You certainly, for those who have watched this team all season, I think everyone was reasonably skeptical that the 3-point shooting would keep up, and they certainly didn't fall in love with it at all. Just took those 3 in the second half, as you mentioned. Turnover-wise, there was a flurry of them in the first half that was really, I think, 4 out of 6 possessions at one point. They turned the ball over. But if I'm looking at this right, they had 4 in the second half and just 1 over the course of the 2 overtimes. So the basketball wasn't pretty, and the shots weren't always good, but they did take better care of the basketball, and at least were able to get shots and get opportunities to be able to score. Thought those were important. Transition points, I thought they ended up with only 10 fast break points, but I do think there were a few of those opportunities that really got the crowd into it. Those were big.
Second alley-oop to Justin Smith was beautiful.
Yeah,
that was pretty
second
sweet.
chance points were big early, but that kind of tailed off a little bit. And then the assist number was pretty low in the second half. I think they ended up with 11 assists for the game. A lot of it, just trying to get the ball to.
Yeah, they only wound up -3 out of the bench.
Yeah, that was
kind
given how the bench play started. That was that seemed.
But then again, Jerod was off the bench and Justin Smith was a starter. If you because of the illness, you flip those, you might get more out of the bench. So Justin Smith finished with 12.
So I mean, like you said, that I think the not a ton else sticks out. They did a good job getting to the free throw line, just not a great job of converting. Out rebounded Wisconsin, and like I said, the turnovers tailing off in the second half, I thought was a big key from a team standpoint.
Ryan, any other numbers that you want to talk about before we?
I apologize. I'd use the rest facilities, so I missed what you guys talked about. But I would say that if you looked at the scoreline and said that Indiana was going to outshoot Wisconsin from 3-point range percentage-wise and tie in the number made, and you told me that they were going to outshoot Wisconsin from the free throw line and out-rebound them, I'd have told you they won this game. I wouldn't think it would have taken 2 overtimes, but I would have told you they would have won the game. Difference in the game was, of course, that Indiana had some guys in foul trouble, and I think that they let Wisconsin get back into it in that stretch you were talking about where certain guys weren't on the floor. But, I think that in some ways, given how mixed up the bench was in this game and with the foul trouble, and then plus, Deron Davis maybe not feeling great and them having to play some guys that maybe they didn't want to in certain situations. I mean, how many, how much did Devontae Green play in the second half? I mean, I barely saw him.
Almost none. He jacked that bad step back three, and then he didn't play again until Al Durham fouled out.
And so you have a thin bench guard wise, because of that. And so you did see Zach McRoberts get in a little bit, probably in lieu of him, but it was just kind of in flux. And again, I think that just where we're at with this team, not getting what they were supposed to get from certain guys this year, that really the bench is going to be, and the way the bench is used and the way the substitutions are used are going to feel weird until next year when you have a more balanced roster. This team just doesn't have it right now. So they're kind of just fighting through, and the coaching staff, I agree, they need to be better with the way they use their substitutions and everything. But quite frankly, I don't envy the position they're in right now.
Andy's going to have to go back to lineup analysis. We thought we were done with the substitution.
We're not going to do that. We don't want to take years off Andy's lineup.
Don't pull me back into that. Don't you pull me back into that. You can't do that to me.
Won't do it.
The other thing I would say is just in general about the defense on Hap. There seemed like stretches where he really scored in bunches as we've become accustomed to him playing him. But they really, he had 23 points. He took 18 field goal attempts and 10 free throws to get 23 points. So he's a guy who's going to score, particularly on a team like IU that doesn't have a great matchup for him. But I did think they made his life difficult, forced him to make some passes out to guys. And there were times that those guys were able to take advantage and knock down shots. But I did think overall, those are pretty good numbers. If you're, doesn't on the surface, doesn't feel great to say, hey, you gave up 23 points to a guy, but you also gave him up, and he played 45 minutes in 2 overtimes to get and took 28 combined field goal attempts and free throws to get 23 points. So I thought a decent job by the slew of guys that they had try to guard him, including Duran late in the game, which there was really not a great alternative at that point, because I don't think you could have him guard somebody else on the floor, but they really tried to put him in ball screens. And I thought the rotations and guys being in good position to make steals, it was one that Duran and Rob played really well together and ended up getting a steal. Just thought there were some of those scenarios where from a team defense standpoint, they really covered for one another in situations where they needed to find ways to get stops against Hap.
Yep. All right, coming up on the assembly call, we continue our breakdown of Indiana's victory over Wisconsin. Another number that jumps out, Juwan Morgan was plus 20 tonight. Yet he had 4 turnovers, missed 9 shots. It was an interesting game for Juwan. We'll talk about that. And then another stellar performance from Rob Finney as well. That's coming up on the assembly call. Stick with us. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Catch us live immediately following every IU basketball game. No matter how many overtimes there are, no matter how late it ends, we will be here for you, as we are tonight, plus every Thursday night at our website, assemblycall.com. While you're there, make sure you sign up for our free IU Hoops email newsletter. Over 6,000 of your fellow IU Hoops fans are subscribed. It'll make you a smarter and more well-informed IU basketball fan. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. We are breaking down Indiana's 75-73 victory over Wisconsin. The Hoosiers win in overtime again. I guess the next step now is to just win a game in regulation, win a second in a row. Baby steps, I suppose, as we come out of this losing skid. 2 guys, though, that I want to talk about here to begin this segment, Juwan Morgan and Rob Finney. Let's start with Juwan, Ryan. And look, you look at the numbers. I mean, he had a great rebounding night. 15 rebounds, 5 of them offensive, 10 defensive rebounds. He had 3 assists. I thought there was a really important play he made in the first half when it was 17-12 after that little 5-point possession that Wisconsin had. And, we had kind of put the clamps on him defensively after that, but we weren't getting anything going offensively, and he got a defensive rebound and was just like, you know what, screw this. I'm taking it, going the other way. It was really awkward, but he got fouled, made 1 free throw. It's the kind of play that you've been wanting to see from him, Ryan, where you say, like, when things are going bad, those guys have to step up. I thought he did that. That spurred a little run for Indiana, that kind of got us back going after it felt like Wisconsin was kind of taking control of the game. But, again, and as I mentioned, Indiana plus 20 with him on the court. While his defense one-on-one against Ethan Happ was just so-so, and there's only so much he can do because of the size advantage and not wanting to foul.
Not wanting to get into foul trouble.
Right. Yet. But I thought outside of defending Happ one-on-one, like in terms of rotations and activity and all those other things, I thought he really played a good game defensively, and I think that's why Indiana was better with him on the court. So, he took too many threes. He wasn't able to get going offensively outside of that little stretch at the start of the second half. And obviously, we're all just glad that he was able to get back in the game after taking that elbow from Ethan Happ, which was not malicious or mean-spirited, but was absolutely flagrant. So,
by the letter of the law, that is a flagrant.
Yeah.
And it should have been called a loose ball foul at the time and then upgraded to a flagrant foul. I don't know how the official didn't call that when it happened, but whatever.
So anyway, I think Juwan Morgan did a lot of things that contributed to this victory, but also, we saw some of the offensive struggles that we've seen from him where he just can't seem to get in a rhythm offensively anymore now for a while. And overall, he's just got to be better with his fouls because 2 or 3 of his fouls tonight, again, are just... you got 2 freshmen, Romeo Langford and Rob Finney, that I thought played really good defense. 0 fouls between them in like 90 minutes. And Juwan just can't, he's playing a different type of defense, but he just can't help himself from those really bad fouls each game. So, kind of a very Juwan Morgan game tonight, but even kind of to the next level with some of the rebounds and some of the impact that he had. What'd you think of this night?
At one point, the way he was going, I thought he was going to get 20 rebounds. I just thought because they were just all falling to him, and he was making he was doing the extra work to get them, but at some point, a couple of them just fell right to him perfectly, off longer shots. And he grabbed some offensive rebounds that were clutch too. Offensively, Juwan just has not been in the flow lately, and you know what? I think offensively, when he's not in the flow, it leads him to trying to be too aggressive defensively to make something happen. And I don't think it's a conscious thing. I think it's subconscious. He thinks, oh, there's the ball. I can go grab it. And he gets fouls. And a couple of his fouls were silly. The fact that he had 15 rebounds, didn't break 10 double digits in points is shocking because that's not Juwan Morgan. He did make 3 or 4 of his free throws, which was a positive because he hasn't been shooting them well lately. He was 0 of 3 from 3. And, I guess we're okay with him taking 3-pointers, but he hasn't been making them lately.
I'm getting less and less okay with it.
Yeah, I am too. But early in the season, you relied on him to make a couple of those a game. 3 of 12 from the field to have 9 points and take 12 shots. Not great. But again, he was battling against guys in the post who were big and athletic in not necessarily athletic in Hap, but Iverson was coming down and he's a super athletic guy helping out on him. Reavers was guarding him well. Those are just tough guys to go up against. They are. And so you don't expect him to dominate the game, but I certainly expected a better offensive performance. That's it. I thought defensively, his off-ball defense was, even when it wasn't, he wasn't getting a block or anything like that, he was intimidating enough to make guys think about it. He was showing on double teams on the perimeter and then recovering to Hap really well. I thought, of course, Hap beat him sometimes because that's what Hap does. And there were some, bad calls, and a couple of his fouls were bad calls because that's what Hap does. So I just think that, I thought it was a mixed bag performance, but his work on the glass and defensively really made up for any shortcomings offensively. Obviously, you want to see him go better than 3 for 12, and you want to see him play more than 28 minutes in an ideal world. But that just wasn't his night. And I also think that being in the foul trouble kind of did get him out of a rhythm. I thought it was pretty obvious offensively he got out of rhythm when those foul calls came. But the fact this team was able to persevere the last 4 minutes of regulation or 3 minutes of regulation and overtime, both overtimes without him, and get a win.
Both of our wins have come when he's left the game with injury. I'm not saying that's it's just kind of a random note in this ridiculous, weird season.
He also didn't look good after he came back from the elbow to the face. He really didn't. But looked fine defensively, but offensively he looked lost. And you saw him on the sideline with a big ice bag on the side of his head, and he got hit in the jaw. So that's not a good sign. That means he probably had a headache of some kind, and that's why they took him to the locker room, probably checked him for a concussion. So again, not a great sign, but he definitely was a little bit different after he came back from that.
From my perspective, I thought there were times that he just, when he got positioned and really took his time in the post, I thought he was able to be effective. I think the one charge he had where he really lowered his shoulder and got called for, I think that was his 4th at the time. It came after a possession where he got
a weak call in the Big Ten.
I don't know. He put his head down.
His shoulder, but come on,
his head down and lowered his shoulder because it was just so obvious. We can't complain about all of them. Sometimes that
was a foul.
The good calls are the exceptions. But
Reavers fell like he was 112 pounds. Come on.
All right, but he still fouled.
Yeah, but everybody's doing that to draw charges. So it is what it is. But you can't put your head down after you've done that. But that came after a play where he'd gotten his shot blocked on the prior possession, and it just was another case, kind of like what you said on the defensive end to a certain extent, just trying to make up for something and do too much. And it was during that big Wisconsin run where I think he took it upon himself to say, hey, we need to get a bucket. But I really thought at the beginning of the second half, there was a sequence where he was just grabbing every rebound and he was just relentless inside. And I think he scored or got fouled around in that stretch. And just from an emotional standpoint, kind of gave everybody a lift. I got the crowd into the game that there was that one sequence there where he was just really playing so hard on both ends. And yeah, he's got to figure out how to not, how to play barely over half of what ended up being a 50-minute basketball game. They just, and I thought he did okay with that at times in the first half, where he would didn't really let Hap go, but did a better job of just putting his arms up and saying, if he's going to score over me, he's going to score over me. I can't pick up these fouls, especially because he picked one up on a charge pretty early and played most of the rest of the half without getting himself into any more trouble. But just got to try to figure out a way to do that. He picked up a few in the second half after, kind of dialing it back a little bit, I guess you could say, in the first. But overall, I thought the emotional lift he gave and kind of his tenacity on the glass gave a big lift, but has to find a way to be there for the end of the game.
Ryan, earlier tonight, you were daring Indiana fans to dream about a future that includes Race Thompson and Trace Jackson Davis on the block. I'm gonna add to that as we, we're all excited about this win, but we're still 14-14, and two of our last 14. So by no means does this completely turn the season around. We got to see Indiana, back it up with another strong performance on Saturday. But if we're dreaming about the future, how about for the next 3 years, or no, I guess the next 2 years after this one? Backcourt defense led by Rob Finney and Al Durham, because those guys are turning in to just, lockdown defenders on the perimeter. We saw what they did to Carson Edwards. We saw what they did to Iowa for most of the game. Obviously, Bohannon went off late, but for most of that game, the defense from our guards was really good. Tonight, Wisconsin comes in, with a couple of guards in Trice and Davison that they really count on, and guys who are typically very efficient offensively. Trice ends up scoring 12 points, goes 2 of 10 from the field, obviously made those big 3 free throws late. Guess who fouled him? Not Al Durham or Rob Finney. And Brad Davison, 3 points, 1 of 11 from the field. Got frustrated into forcing up some shots, just like Carson Edwards did, against Purdue. It was Davison's third worst offensive outing of his career. It doesn't get much worse than 3 points and 1 for 11, but
1 for 7 from 3 too.
Yeah, and the thing that impressed me tonight about Finney is, he has been a really physical defender. And he's quick, he moves his feet well, but he's had trouble defending without fouling. Tonight, he didn't foul at all. When he would kind of dive down on the post guys, he would slap down. He got 3 or 4 steals, but he wasn't fouling. He was keeping guys in front of him. Obviously, he's more athletic than Davison, who he was matched up on a lot of the night, but he kept him in front of him. And, Andy, just really a really impressive individual performance from him. But then when you throw Al Durham into it, too, who had a little bit of trouble with Trice late, kind of looked like Trice was pushing off on him a little bit, but Al also probably didn't move his feet enough. But those two guys just continue to really be stellar, kind of keying Indiana's defense out there on the perimeter.
Yeah, Archie made a comment after the game. Rob Finney's playing as good of defense as you can possibly play as a freshman in this league, and I think he's getting back to the form that he saw before the concussion, and that's taken a while for him to get there. As everybody knows who's watched some of these games and had gotten excited about the trajectory that he was on at the time when he went out with the concussion. But you're starting to see flashes of the same guy that you saw earlier in the season, and the same guy that we talked so much about during those games about how much fun it's going to be to watch him over the course of his career. And so he's really, he had some timely drives that made the bucket at the end of regulation off a broken play that was really good. But I thought did a good job of really balancing attacking the basket, not making dumb decisions when he was in there. There's when he dribbles back through the lane, kind of whirls around. But that would have been an easy place to take a bad shot. There really wasn't a shot to be made there. And so you're seeing, again, some of that decision making that he's had. But it all starts for him on the defensive end. And that's such a big part of what they want to do defensively, with being able to really put pressure on the ball at the point of attack and not get beat and need other guys to help and put everybody in rotation. And I thought he really fought over screens, would cut off drives that seemed like the guy was just ready to turn the corner, and he would get in front of him on the wing, and they'd have to pull the ball back out and kick it around to the top of the key. So I think that's something that Al's done really well too. And I think at the end of the game was a little bit of the same thing. Really tried to get into Trice because he had, made the 1-3. And it was, if you probably give him enough space, you may get the call on the push off. But if you're bodied up against him and you're almost initiating the contact, it becomes a little bit harder to do that. So I've now defended the officials twice within a pretty short time span.
How
so
dare you?
We'll let you get your licks in here in the next segment. Don't worry.
I was gonna say, probably a sign that it's too late. I'm delirious.
One real quick comment about a guy in the starting lineup that we haven't mentioned, Ryan, and that's Justin Smith, who I thought was better offensively tonight. The 3-pointer was not a good shot, but he went off the dribble some tonight, but he was more under control. He only had one turnover. He actually had that nice little spin move where he kind of flipped the ball in. I don't really know if that was a good shot, but he got lucky and it went in. But, he had 3 offensive rebounds, ran in transition. I thought, he was not a zero offensively. 12 points on 5 of 9 shooting, got the rebounds. Obviously, the 5 fouls, and that hurt.
The last one, he slapped the ball. He got all ball. They called it because Hap had the ball.
Yeah, but, for a guy whose playing time has been up and down and didn't play much against Iowa, I was impressed with how he responded. Being in the starting lineup, I thought this is one of the better games we've seen him play during the losing streak, and I think it was a good step forward for him tonight.
Agreed. I thought that he had the first possession of the second half. He tried to drive and wound up just missing everything, like the backboard. And I think it just went out of bounds. I don't even really know what happened there. But other than that, I thought that he was pretty much in control. And I think that when he wants to dribble, if instead of facing guys up, and if he just sort of backs them down a little bit and then uses his athleticism to get over and around people, he's fine. But when he tries to drive at guys, he's so easy to steal the ball from and poke it out and or just get flustered. And then he should never shoot a 3-pointer again this season. I mean, it's just he's so far off. Like, I don't care if there's 15 feet between you and your defender, there's probably a reason. And it's, I just think he needs to be smarter than that at this point. I know he wants to be a well-rounded guy, and it had a lot of people talking early in the season about how he's going to be a draft pick and all this, and he wants to show multiple skills. Dude, stay within yourself right now. You really need to, because you're on thin ice as far as playing time goes with a guy like Race Thompson showing up and playing the way he has. You need to start accentuating the positives that you can bring to a game, and that's shooting, and that's shooting in close, that's playing defense, that's rebounding, and then that's also going after and being a garbage man on the glass offensively. That's what he needs to be doing, and running in transition as well. As you said, you run in transition, and if you're a bigger guy, good things happen. We said that from the beginning. Cody Zeller stole 6 to 8 points every single game just by running in transition. If you're a bigger guy, if you're a guy who's above 6'8", run in transition. I really hope that no high school kids are up this late listening to this. But if you listen on the podcast, if you're a guy who's above 6'6" and you play in high school, run the floor. You will score an extra 6 points a game. You want to get those averages up, that's how you do it. And seeing Smith finally sprint down the floor for once, and look what happened. Finney found him for an easy lay-in. He's a guy who jogs a lot, and tonight he was sprinting. And so, it is an evolution. There was some better there. I don't know if there was a lot of great, but there was some better. And he just needs to be a smarter player for this team to succeed.
Last thing that I want to mention before we get out of the segment, we have to talk about it. It was at the end of the first overtime when it's 68-68. Indiana has the ball on the sideline, and we run the play where Romeo just runs away from the play and is not involved, and Al Durham gets it and just shoots it when he had 2 seconds and should have dribbled. That was not good execution on a play where you have a chance to get a shot for the win. I don't think it's a very good play if your goal is for Romeo to be running away from the ball, and then Al, obviously just needs to understand that he can take a few dribbles there before he shoots it.
I can tell you exactly what they were going for. They were back screening for Romeo to get him a flare towards the corner, so he would have a jump shot. It's hard on the side out of bounds. Side out of bounds are very difficult to run a great play out of because you don't know what the defense is going to throw at you. You don't know the angles for the pass, all that stuff. It's really difficult. So you have to create.
Except that in this case, you did know because you tried to run the play once and then you took a timeout and they lined up the exact same way, and then you ran the exact same way.
Here's what happened. So... They switched everything the first time, and then they ran it the second time and they didn't switch everything. So there was a different look from it.
I I think the challenge was you've got they put Reavers on the ball, which is smart, and you've got Finney, who's IU's shortest player, trying to take it. So I see where maybe you can say you're going to try to flare him across the court, but there's no way in the world that you are going to be able to make that pass with that guy on him,
right?
In that scenario. And you knew that no matter what they switched or didn't switch, you weren't going to be able to get that because they weren't going to.
Now that part I agree with, and they did set that up. But I mean, honestly, Finney is the guy who's inbounding that there because you're not going to have Deron Davis inbounding it there. You're not, maybe Juwan Morgan could do it, but he's out. And Justin,
I'm not saying there were a lot better options on the court. Maybe Al would be the guy that you think of who was on the floor. But
right, no, and what they did was they tried to get Al coming to the ball, get him closer to the ball or get him closer to the 3-point line and have maybe a dribble or two to drive and then get into the lane with it. He flared instead of flaring towards the hoop. He flared out, caught the ball far from the hoop, and I think he was just frazzled at that point.
Yeah, just bad execution. Bottom line.
Yeah, instead of cutting towards the hoop and catching it, maybe having one or two dribbles and a pull up, which we've seen Al hit this year, he went backwards and had a standing three. And you saw it as he was coming off the floor. Archie Miller said, "Dude, you had 2 seconds. This wasn't a catch and shoot situation." And
information that would have been useful.
I'm sure he knew. He just in his head.
We always say, I'm sure they knew, but maybe they're just not told these things, or they don't listen. Either way, it's another example of course, you have a chance to win a game and you don't even give yourself a good shot to do it.
You're right.
That's the frustration.
And you know what? I thought at the end of regulation, getting Finney a drive and pull up was fine. I thought that was fine. I thought that was run actually pretty well, and I was actually surprised the shot they got. I was expecting him to get something from 40 feet, but I thought they actually got a pretty good shot, a pretty good look at least. If it goes up 2 seconds more, Justin Smith has a tip in to win it. I mean, those situations are hard. I will say, I think that for the most part, Archie Miller's out of bounds plays when they're under the basket, when they are a little higher than that one was. I think they've been pretty good this year.
Don't do this to yourself. Don't do this to yourself. The shot clock running down. Let's lob it into Deron Davis.
Okay.
8 feet from the basket. That's happened multiple times.
Yeah, that's
Aren't
not.
You trying to take the shine off of this win.
Andy's had some great interruptions this segment. Those
were not where the ball was supposed to go either time. I think.
Okay, but that's still on the coaches.
You're right.
So
it is.
I'm just saying. We got to get better at that. And we were better at that earlier in the year.
Anyway,
I said this year, not this game. Okay, I think they've been.
That's happened in other games, but
I love Ryan's eye rolls when he gets interrupted. It's just so great. It's so great. You don't get to appreciate that.
I have tasted my own medicine, and it is bitter.
When I do it, I have really good points. When you guys do it, it's just rude.
Mute him. All right. Coming up in our final segment, we hand out our game ball.
The chemistry that the three of you have.
We'll hit any other storylines that we haven't hit yet, and then in last call, we'll deliver our final thoughts on Indiana's win over Wisconsin. That is next on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show, finally breaking down another Indiana victory as your Indiana Hoosiers beat the Wisconsin Badgers 75-73 in double overtime at Simon Scott Assembly Hall. I am Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, wrapping up our breakdown of this game, and this segment is going to pass 12 o'clock in the Central Time Zone. Ryan, I don't think we'll quite make it to midnight on the Pacific Time Zone, but who knows?
Out here,
see how long this segment can go. I don't think Andy would be able to last that long, but okay. This is the time in the show where we always hand out our game balls. Plenty of options to choose from here. Andy, why don't you go first?
This is I mean, there's two that stand out to me. I'm going to go with Romeo. Hit the game winner. Played 45 minutes. Made a lot of big plays. Scored the bulk of the points in the overtime periods, and as we said, hit the game winner. Race Thompson to me is the other guy who I would strongly consider, just because I thought his play in the first half really gave IU a lift, and if he's not able to play the way that he did for as long as he had to play with Justin and Juwan out, the other options were not going to be able to hang in there and do what he was able to do. But I'm gonna say Romeo. It's a lot tougher than you would think to take the guy that scored 22 points over the guy that scored 1. But I'll go with him.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I think those are probably the two that are going to jump to people's minds. But I think
Rob, I think you could give an honorable mention to Rob Finney. I don't think he's in the mix with those.
because his defense was so terrific.
Yeah, and
and the big shot that he had at the end of regulation.
And he played point guard for 43 minutes. Yeah. I mean, that's a rough thing to do, and he's chasing those Wisconsin guards. So I think he deserves a hat tip.
Deron Davis for coming in and playing 22 minutes after puking before the game and not looking good at all when he was in there early. He really rebounded throughout the game,
especially
to play better. Yeah.
And I think you have to give Race Thompson credit also for playing 21 minutes when he played 22 all year, and most of that in the last 2 games. So
and made a big free throw. I mean, his 1 point was important.
And his second free throw looked really good, actually. Like, the form looked great. First free throw just looked like he hadn't taken a free throw all year, which he had.
I'm going with Romeo, though, by the way.
Yeah, I am too. I think we're all in agreement. Romeo hit the big shot at the end of the game. He played great defense all night. He had a lapse or two offensively, a segment of time where he maybe wasn't attacking the way he should have been. But, he's also, I think there's the caveat that he's a freshman still. And I agree with it, though, because, 45 minutes, 22 points. He hit free throws. He hit 5 of 8 free throws. He missed a couple where you're just kind of like, oh, God, Romeo, you make that, the game's over. But 7 rebounds. He played hard. He crashed the boards. And then he made the big shot at the end. So you got to go with Romeo, I think, in this one. Although certainly hat tip to Race Thompson, to Rob Finney, and, of course, to Deron Davis for gutting one out.
Also, several people in the chat mob with honorable mention to Bruiser Flint for challenging that call.
Yeah, nice job, Bruiser.
Way to go, Bruiser.
I would say Tim Garl might need to earn a game ball at some point.
He's got season. Like the lifetime
variety of injuries and ailments that he's had to deal with. I'm not sure anybody's been more valuable this season than him, given that virtually everyone has been injured or ill at some point. It seems like.
I like that Brian Toohey gave himself a game ball for taking a nap from 6 to 7 before the game. That was smart. But the comment of the night in the chat mob, now that this is the second straight game that an IU player has just mysteriously been throwing up right before a game, and this is from Galen Clavio, of course, the host of Crimson Cast. Guys have to stop eating at Gresham for pregame. That is just great Indiana University humor. It's great.
There you go.
Great late night post-game show humor. What else haven't we hit from this game? I mean, let's just maybe step back real quick and take a big picture look, Andy. As ridiculous as it is, you are now going to get questions.
Oh, here we go.
just
as it
address
is every year, so it shall be.
we finally won a game, Andy. Okay. Now, obviously, this doesn't put us on the bubble. However, if we're going to dare to dream forward, just humor the folks who want to dare to dream tonight. About the NIT or the NCAA tournament, wherever you want to go with it. But just what does this do? Big picture.
It helps. So not dead. So play that Undertaker gif coming out, and then we'll just move on from there. I mean, the reality is that you're still only 500 at this point. And I think I had looked up at one point when IU was maybe 2 games over 500. There just haven't been teams that have made it with that record. Even the teams that have gotten in with 15 losses, over, I think, 1 each in the last couple of years, have gotten closer to 20 wins. I feel like I have to look that up at some point when it's not 1 a.m. But so you've got to get a few games clear of 500. This does give IU what I think would be a 6th quad 1 win. Going into today, I believe they had 5 quad 1 wins, yet no quad 2 wins, or like 0-5 maybe against in quad 2. So it helps you. I mean, it gives you the hope to still believe in something. So that's good. But yeah, just have to find ways to keep winning. The good, I don't know whether it's good or bad, but the bubble is fairly shallow. I'm not going to get into the bubble is the worst we've ever seen, because we'll just save that for next year when everybody's saying this is the worst bubble we've ever seen. But it is pretty shallow. There aren't a lot of other teams right now that when I put together the projections that came out today, that were really considered in the mix. And even some of those have since lost, and some other bubble teams have lost. So to think that there probably won't be some kind of opportunity where teams are going to play their way out is naive. But, you've also got to try to envision this team stringing together multiple wins, which feels a little bit more possible in the way that they've played over the last 3 games than it did a few weeks ago. But it's certainly a quality win. The good thing about the Big Ten is there are almost no opportunities to take bad losses, which really is something that IU, I don't think any of the losses have fallen outside of the top 2 quadrants at this point, which is fine. But the losses still matter at some point, and you haven't ever had anybody get in the tournament with more than 15 losses, and IU sitting on 14 right now. So you're you're racing against history at some point to try to figure out a way to do it. But
if ever there were a team that could do it, that team would probably have a road win at Michigan State and a win over Marquette.
If there's a team, I mean, if something inexplicable is going to happen, then this team feels as well qualified to do it as any. So in that regard, I think it seems fair. But
I did read
too early in my eyes to talk about that at this point. But all hope is not completely dead at this point.
I did read somebody say that Duke's losses without Zion Williamson won't hurt them when it comes time to consider him if he's healthy for the tournament. So can IU just hit a reset button on the Big Ten season for all the injuries they've had? I mean,
yes, in a since deleted tweet, someone did say that the losses would not count, were the exact words that were used. That tweet has since been rephrased after said person got ratioed to high hell. And
I was part of that. Moved on. I was part of that.
As was I. So anyway, so that's those do count. They are taken into consideration. But I think the fact that Romeo and Juwan have not been the guys missing games, like to really, no matter how many injuries there have been, I don't think that's something that IU can hang.
You don't think they're going to take into account we've been missing Jerome Hunter all season? You don't think that they're going to give us a greatest on a curve that way?
Yep, 0-0 so far for IU. So none of these counted. Nothing to worry about, everybody.
Yeah.
So we'll see, but I mean, it's certainly a good thing. They've still got 2 or 3 games at home. I think if you get to a point where you win the next 2, where if you can beat Michigan State to get a sweep of them somehow, and although that game won't count either because they don't have Nick Ward and Josh Langford.
Right, of course.
Damn,
so close. And then if you find a way to get a road win, that's the other thing that IU's really missing right now. They've got 2 road wins on the season, and the Michigan State one is a big one, but they're 2-9, I want to say, on the road or something like that. 2 and a lot. So to be able to find a way to win at Illinois would be big. So I think we're probably having a different conversation if they're able to string together these next 2 wins, and we'll take them one at a time and see from there. But hey, they're still alive. So I guess that's more than maybe people thought we could have said a while ago. But
we won a game
at 14-14. There's work to be done.
There's work to be done. Indiana
we're
now
going to win this weekend. We're in town.
We're in town. We know we're going to win, although that didn't work out so well last year. But
overtime and a garbage 3-pointer to win it.
I know. Indiana now a top 25 defense according to Ken Pom. So the defense keeps improving. Free throw percentage defensively still number 1 in the country by a full 0.5%. So that continues to be the one thing that has bounced in IU's favor, which is nice to see. Anything else that we need to cover, fellas, before we?
My bed with my body.
Jeez, that's not what anybody wanted to think about after a.
What? I'm gonna be clothed.
It's also 10:00 there.
I'm tired. I'm an old man, Andy.
All right. Well, coming up here on Thursday, we'll have a new edition of Assembly Call Radio for you. And then, of course, Saturday, the IU Michigan postgame show. We won't be on that show, but Will DeWitt is coming back to host the show. Chat Mob Chad Schwartzkopf will be there. Josh Wilson from the Inside Out Pod, who has also done some of our game previews on Banner Monday. Those guys are going to take you through that game, and I think we will probably try and pop on via our phones on Zoom and give some live reaction on our way to the Crazy Horse. So if you're going to be in Bloomington, we'll be at the Crazy Horse from 3 to 6, and we would love to see you guys there because that's why we love coming up and doing these trips, and hopefully it's after another victorious Indiana performance. All right, guys, let's go to last call, and let's wrap this thing up. Andy, you're first since time zone advantage to you.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. I wouldn't think of getting off though without hearing what Ryan has to say. So it doesn't matter. You can go in whatever order you want. I mean, like I said, it's hard not to be happy for these guys with the way they've bounced back. I know it's been a pretty terrible stretch of play. It's been frustrating at times to watch these guys, but for whatever reason, for as long as it took to kind of turn that corner after that Minnesota game, I don't think anyone would argue that you haven't seen a different attitude, a different effort from these guys, and for them to come through with it 3 games in a row or for a 3rd straight game after not being rewarded with a victory in the other 2, I think says a lot about the program going forward, and hopefully for some has calmed some of those fears. Yeah, there's X's and O's stuff and lineups to argue, but I think to be able to pull the team from an attitude perspective, I do give the staff credit, and I give the seniors in Juwan and Zach McRoberts a lot of credit as well. They, I forget whether it was Rob or Romeo who mentioned it after the game that those guys had done a really good job of keeping everybody together. And a win like this, I think, is a testament to what those guys had. So for as much as we all lamented the lack of leadership that seemed to be shown both from the coaches and from the players during that stretch, I think the last 3 games, it's not a one-game blip like the Michigan State game felt like. This has been pretty sustained effort defensively. The offense has still been ugly, but the effort defensively has really come back, and it was just great to see them rewarded. So not a super quick turnaround, but also a game that you've got to really get up for with Michigan State. They played so well at Michigan, and they've got nearly a week to get ready to play IU in a game that's going to mean a lot to them after IU came onto their home floor and won. But this team needs some rest after these overtime affairs, so hopefully they can get that, and that no one's thrown up before, during, or even after the game against Michigan State. But kudos to these guys to be able to find a way to win a game that was a tough win against a team that IU has had such a tough time getting over the hump against in these last few years.
Ryan, your final thoughts before you go eat ice cream fully clothed on a bed.
Yep. I'm excited for this team to beat Wisconsin. This program has had such a tough time beating Wisconsin. I'm so glad we never have to watch IU play Ethan Happ again, knock on wood. But no, I just think it's great for this team. As we said, to start and we were talking before we went on the air, how this is just bizarro world that Indiana somehow went to the Breslin Center and won, and then somehow beat Wisconsin this year, but can't win other games. It's just insane. That those are like the 2 things you can almost always count on as losses for this program. And somehow this team that has struggled doing everything else won those games. Obviously the NCAA tournament is a pipe dream at this point, but this team needs to focus game to game and not start thinking about that. You beat Michigan State on Saturday after what they did to Michigan. And by the way, a Michigan State team that doesn't have 2 of their best players. That's a beatable team. Indiana beat that team on its home floor with Nick Ward, and Nick Ward is no longer there. Indiana plays smart, plays the way it's supposed to, and gets a good boost from the home crowd. Then you start talking about, okay, now let's go to Illinois, a team that's very beatable, and let's go beat them. You do that, then you get Rutgers at home. That's a team you can beat. Now let's go to the Big Ten tournament and make some noise.
Stop right there.
I'm just saying make noise. I'm not saying win. I'm not saying win the dang thing. But I just think that this team needs to build on this, and it needs to build on the last couple of performances. Didn't beat Purdue, didn't beat Iowa, easily could have won both those games. And it needs to understand that the reasons why it lost those games and also the reasons why they almost won those games, and focus on those. The offense looked much better tonight. That has been a huge issue. The offense looked much better, much smoother. Guys were in the right spot. Guys were getting open shots. Guys were getting good looks at the hoop. And then you look at that defense, and it just keeps building on itself and building on itself and building it on itself. This team is going to be a defensive monster for the rest of the year if they play this way. Can't make it easy on anyone. And ever since that Minnesota game where Archie Miller said we'd see drastic changes, we've seen a different team, and they have played very well. It almost makes you wish earlier in the season something had happened to spark that. But you know what? I'm glad it's here now because we're seeing this team start to build something.
Absolutely. I'm just so proud of this team tonight. I mean, they, as we said, they've played so hard since the Minnesota game. Not always well, but so hard since the Minnesota game. And I'm so glad they got rewarded. And just, another tip of the cap to Romeo Langford, who, there have been so many just ridiculous narratives out there about him. But for a guy who we know where he's going to be next year, we know what is in front of him for his basketball career. And we've seen a lot of one-and-done players who have come in and the seasons haven't gone well, and those guys sometimes check out and aren't fully invested. And there is no way anybody can say Romeo is anything other than fully invested in this team's success with how hard he has played, just how much of a team player he has been. And just to see, the smile on his face at the end of the game, and for him to, learn from his last 2 experiences and to take it all the way to the hole and make that shot. Obviously, we'd all love to be able to watch him grow, for 4 years and just see what kind of an amazing college basketball player he could become. But just to watch his growth from the beginning of the season to now, it hasn't come easy. It's been hard. The offense is a slog sometimes, and we've talked about on this show how sometimes he seems lost in it, whether it's, his fault or the coach's fault, whoever it is. to see him come and make that final shot and stick with it and stick with this team and be such an important part of why they have turned this thing around since Minnesota and hopefully can do something down the stretch. I know that chances are his legacy at Indiana isn't going to be hanging a banner and making a deep tournament run or winning a Big Ten title and all of this stuff. But I think when we look back on it, we're going to see a guy who just continued to play hard, continued to improve. And, even though, we know where he's going to be next year, he doesn't seem to be thinking about that right now. He really seems to be fully invested in what this team has going on. And that's what makes it so much fun to watch him play right now. All righty, that's going to do it for us on this edition of the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. You can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter, which I'm going to go get ready to go right now, even though it's late, because that's what we do. Thanks for listening. We'll be back to talk IU hoops again with you Thursday night. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
Thank you for being here and for listening to this episode of the Assembly Call. We appreciate it. And we really do rely on the support of audience members like you to keep our show going and to keep growing. And so we have set up a page on our website at assemblycall.com/support that lists 5 ways that you can support the Assembly Call. And we encourage you to choose whichever method is the easiest and most convenient for you. One of the methods is donating, and so many of you have donated, and we appreciate it so much. On that page, you can choose a monthly recurring donation or an annual recurring donation or just a one-time donation, whatever works for you. And if you don't want to donate, another way to support the show is you can use our affiliate URLs, iutickets.shop or iustore.shop when you're going to shop for tickets or gear, and we will get paid a small commission when you use those links. But however you support the show, we appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, and cut.
This tweet just came out. There are now 13 teams with at least 6 Quadrant 1 wins and no Quadrant 3 or 4 losses. 12 of them, Virginia, Duke, Kentucky, Kansas, Michigan State, UNC, Michigan, Wisconsin, Marquette, Maryland, Mississippi State, and Kansas State, are very comfortably in the field, and the other one is Indiana.
Season's so weird.
There's nothing.
They're like the best bad. It's the best bad team.
But that's also why if we just scrape out some wins down the stretch, I mean...
Well, somebody was saying that, like,
literally,
quite frankly, if Indiana wins, like, let's say they beat Michigan State, this guy was saying that if they finish over 500, they're a better team than Clemson or Butler. Like, they're like, they just have
Butler,
earned it.
Clearly.
Yeah, well, I think that's true. I just don't know that that's
of
enough.
Of course, because it looks bad.
But yeah,
but
yeah, we'll see. Pretty crazy. It's just funny to look at their profile. Even
no bad losses.
Like, in addition to the wins, like, but then you go and like you haven't beaten any of like the kind of middle of the road, like maybe kind of good, like quad 2, like 0 wins in that.
That's crazy.
Now, if they're able to win at Illinois, that one would, I think, fall. I think would fall.
Right. It's almost like we'd have a better chance of making noise in the NCAA tournament than the NIT. You know, because those are the kinds of teams that we beat. Apparently.
Yeah.
What a weird, wacky, wild season. I saw someone, it might have been the Hoosier Hysterics guys, tweeted, this is the first time that we've won at Michigan State and beaten Wisconsin since like 1987 or something. Like something. I don't take that to the bank. I haven't fact checked that, but I would not be surprised.
That seems about right. That seems.
All right, man.
Well, by the way, Thursday I won't be on because I'm flying.
Coach is going to be on. By the way, we got bad news. Coach's team, they lost in the sectional. So that's the bad news. On the bright side, we will get to see Coach this weekend. Yep. Would have rather him be playing, but we're going to get to see him this weekend, so that's nice. And he's going to be on the show Thursday night.
And then you said Kent's going to come down too?
Yeah, I think Kent's going to come down.
I texted him. Like, yeah, he said he hasn't been at the Crazy Horse since it was like $150 for something or other. I'm like, damn, that is.
Bring it on.
I haven't been in a long time either. I wasn't particularly fond of the Crazy Horse, but I'm good now. I mean, that was.
And by the way, we should just say we were disappointed to hear about that. Kent show got canceled on.
I didn't know you were still on. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're still on. Yeah, we're still on YouTube.
YouTube. Yeah, I didn't know. It doesn't matter. We didn't say anything bad.
No. Andy's scoffing at how you still don't understand how the show works.
I thought we were.
We had this exact conversation.
I thought we were off, and it was just 3 of us talking.
No, this is still on YouTube.
Hi guys.
Jerod, why don't you pull up the sound drop from not very long ago when we made this same revelation?
Oh, like I pay attention. When the show's over, I'm like a goldfish. I'm done.
Oh, the podcast is off?
Yeah, the podcast is off. We ended the podcast a long time ago.
So we're just on YouTube.
This
Right?
is
Do
AC
you
After
even
Dark.
understand how this
No,
works?
no.
God's sake.
I thought this was recorded on the podcast. I thought we were
No, we don't. Once the music is over, we stop. that was from weeks ago, by the way. That was not happening right now.
And he's literally saying the exact same thing right now, though, as you did the other one.
I almost knocked my computer desk over there. This weekend's going to be fun. We can do all this stuff in person this weekend.
Thank goodness.
It's going to be so great. Oh, I'm so excited. But yeah, no. So yeah, Kent called me this morning and gave me the bad news.
I know.
Texted me this morning, gave me the bad news because I was supposed to be on his show at 4 Eastern.
Yeah.
And he said, "Yeah, you're free on 4 Eastern now." And I was like, "Oh man."
He's been such a huge supporter of ours, man. I mean, he has believed in us, given us opportunities. So I hate to hear that, but as I told him, this just hastens the beginning of the successful Kent Sterling podcast.
Well, somebody smart's going to pick him up, though. He's a great radio guy, and he's done a lot of great work. And that is that station's loss. So
it is. Patrick in the chat said, in his defense, it is 10 o'clock there.
Yeah, it's super late. I'm just exhausted.
Super late.
Super late.
All right. Well, it's time to go. I'm going to go get this thing posted and get the email up and try to be functional tomorrow. But who cares? I'm on the high of a victory. So
good luck. Kudos to Ken Bykoff, who already has he doesn't, theirs usually isn't as long, but I just saw something on Twitter that he had already posted their like morning after podcast.
Yeah, the Indy Star will have no
show off.
If you're looking for it, Indy Star, for it in the Indy Star tomorrow, there will be no Indiana news in the Indy Star tomorrow because it was too late.
Indiana finally wins, and it doesn't even get coverage in the Indianapolis paper.
Coverage
Yep.
All right, guys.
All right, fellas. See everybody. Thank you so much for being here. This was one of our best live turnouts. Someone was asking, like, do you think there even be anybody there? One of our best live turnouts. You guys are awesome. You guys are awesome.
If this season has taught us anything, it's that you never know when the next win is going to come, so you damn sure better bask in the glory of one when it happens. Celebrate it. So I appreciate all of you being here with us to do that.
Yes, absolutely. All right, everybody. See you on Thursday night.
Later, guys.
All right, see ya.